a name forever associated with the brandy liquor produced here, the French city of Cognac, for which it is named, is an intriguing, rich, and enjoyable place to visit. Its history goes back well before the Middle Ages, with a sequence of events that would take the name Cognac far beyond the borders of France. Join me today for this original documentary, where we'll explore the different periods of the city's history and learn about why it holds the prestigious place with the brand name recognition it has today. For today's trivia question, can you name at least one of the French royal families? Listen carefully throughout the video, and you just might find the answer. If not, you can regain your honor with a quick history review at the end. Going back to prehistoric times, the current site of Cognac was home to the Santones, a tribe that was part of a broader Celtic culture thriving in western Gaul. With fertile land, transport routes, and access to water, the site became integrated into the Roman Empire after the Gallic Wars led by Julius Caesar. The nearby Roman city of Mediolanum Santonum dominated the region, then known as Aquitania. Traveling upriver from Mediolanum Santonum, the current location of Cognac would prove vital to transportation and agriculture. The construction of roads, including the east-west route of the Via Agrippa and the southern route of the current Chemin Boinnet to Périgueux, ensured its place after the fall of the Roman Empire and moving into the early Middle Ages. After the tumultuous period of transition throughout the centuries after the fall of the Romans, Cognac became a strategic crossing point on the Charente River. It became the site of important castles, including the Royal Castle in Cognac and a nearby stronghold in Château Bernard, just several miles away. Shifting control of the town between the French and English crowns, following the reign of Eleanor of Aquitaine and the ensuing conflicts of the Hundred Years' War, the site would retain its economic relevance due in large part to its agricultural exports and the water-powered milling operations along the Charente River. The large diversity of products in the region would help its economy to grow, and a medieval marketplace would be established, based around salt and local agricultural products. While today's farmers market has moved several hundred feet away, this original location still exists today in the city center. The traditional marketplace where the salt was sold originally from the history of Cognac was located right behind me here. Unfortunately today this is a parking lot and not what it once was in the Middle Ages. Few sources exist to confirm the existence of a castle in Château Bernard, but the site was adopted by the Knights Templar in the 12th century with the construction of a powerful Templar commandery. In close proximity to nobility, agriculture, and commerce, it is no surprise that this location flourished in the centuries that followed. With their disappearance in the 14th century, power shifted to the Hospitallers and the French nobility, later setting the stage for the rise of the Valois king that would transform the monarchy during the Renaissance. The outbreak of the Hundred Years' War in 1337 would pit the Valois royals in France against the Plantagenet monarchy in England, with Cognac becoming a highly disputed town that would change hands multiple times throughout the century that followed. Only in 1375 would a settlement be negotiated by Bertrand de Guesclin, a nobleman from Brittany, bringing Cognac back into the possession of the French crown. He would victoriously enter the town on June 1st of that year, with Cognac then becoming a principality of the French monarchy. It wasn't until 1448 that all the titles to the English crown were finally reclaimed, again thanks to the action of the Dukes of Brittany. In 1494, nearly 2 centuries after the Templars' disappearance and the subsequent centuries of fighting between the English and French, the birth of the future Valois king, Francis I, to Charles, the Count of Angoulême, would soon change the course of French history. In 1505, Louis XII, having fallen ill, ordered his daughter and Francis to be married immediately, but only through an assembly of nobles were the two engaged. The marriage took place on the 18th of May 1514, and Francis subsequently inherited the throne. He was crowned King of France in the Cathedral of Reims on the 25th of January 1515. Meanwhile, new ways of thinking emerged from Italy, heavily influencing culture, art, music, and traditional methods. Francis I, a jack of all trades, quickly became enchanted by these new ideas. Influenced by humanism and his broad education, he transformed France into a rising power in the realm of art and innovation, creating close bonds with Leonardo da Vinci. Along with numerous Italian artists, this transfer of knowledge and creativity to the French throne still has echoes today, with the Mona Lisa, brought to France by da Vinci in the 16th century before his death, remaining a masterpiece of Renaissance art. While his humble beginnings would quickly expand to encompass all of the French kingdom, his roots in the city of Cognac would not go unrecognized. He died at the age of 52, but the town's main square is named after him, and a statue of the king, on horseback over his enemies, stands at its center. Another fun fact about Francis I was his incredible height. Standing at approximately 6 feet 5 inches tall, historians can ascertain these figures from the custom armor that was made for this French king. Interestingly, the doorways and stairwells that remain in Cognac today attest to the fact that an average male would likely have only been around 5'7" in the 16th century. King Francis I towered over his subjects in more ways than one. Since the Middle Ages, the ramparts, towers, and gates that protected the settlement here have all changed. Some have been modified and many have disappeared. However, there does remain this one outstanding example. Many years of disuse and neglect led to the degradation of the interior. Surrounding structures that connected to this castle gate and river crossing, such as the medieval bridge, royal castle, and city walls, have all been lost to time. An enjoyable view of the river and town are worth taking the time to climb the spiral steps here. The portcullis and mechanisms used to lift it are gone, but the traces of where and how it operated are clear to see. Medieval guards would have been able to open and close access to the town from these 3 identical entry points. With Cognac being a hotspot of combat between the French and English over the centuries, this location was of a highly strategic importance. However, historical records dating from the 15th century when it was built in its current form are quite good. We know that it was used as a guard tower and then later as a prison. A guided tour is available several times a day on the hour. On the lower levels, prisoners confined between these dark, humid walls left their mark.
Des graffitis là qui montrent les soldats de Saintonge et de l'autre côté vous avez les chasseurs et perruquiers de Saintonge en garnison avec le mot dragon qui revient. C'est une garnison qui a été créée au XVIe siècle par le roi de France qui était la cavalerie, l'infanterie française qui réunissait on va dire...
Original graffiti was uncovered during restoration, buried beneath years of dirt. Historians quickly went to work decoding the names and messages left here. A more detailed look at these prisoners, their families, and stories would require additional research, but the local guides here are very knowledgeable. Tours are available in English. Over the following centuries preceding the French Revolution, the long experience of wine growing would give rise to the emergence of Cognac brandy, with increasingly sophisticated and refined methods of production. With a wide geographical area being available for the cultivation of grapes, the given name Cognac is subdivided into 6 subregions, all of which extend out many miles around the current-day town. Many smaller Cognac producers are not located in the town, but in other nearby backroads locations, such as Aigre, with one of the oldest Cognac producers at Maison Gauthier Cognac, founded during the reign of Louis XIII. The continuing production of wine and agricultural goods was interrupted only by the wars of religion, which erupted in France in the 16th century. With Protestants and Catholics fighting a fierce ideological battle, the regions around Cognac fell victim to pillages, atrocities, and widespread destruction. Nearby cities, such as La Rochelle, saw their populations reduced by up to 3/4 during the siege of 1627. While Cognac may have fared better, it still suffered the loss of buildings and population, with a considerable exodus of Protestants to North America. But the strong demand for export, primarily wine and brandy, would continue unabated, with large markets in the Netherlands and England as primary sources of income. A strong Dutch economy to the north and a powerful Spanish monarchy to the south, with the circulation of silver or gold coinage in exchange for goods, would ensure Cognac's survival over the course of the centuries. These strong economic roots can still clearly be observed in the city today. Made from white grapes, Cognac wine was reputed to be particularly poor in quality for export as wine, as it would spoil during transport. Oftentimes, raw Cognac is even referred to as undrinkable before being distilled. What drove its development as a spirit for export was the added value given to the grapes through the distillation process.
Here you have two alambics. Each one is in 3 parts. Alambic. Réchauffe-vin in French means warm up in English. And a pipe of cold water. So, we pump the wine, we know our volume, we transfer our volume in the alambic, we repump wine here because we have always here the wine for the next time.
This was just as true in the 17th century as it is today, allowing a quality product to be exported over long distances throughout Western Europe and beyond.
My family is in this village since 1635. It's close to 400 years. And we make cognac since 1750, but it's very normal here in the region. And my parents, grandparents create a big stock of cognac, always aged cognac. And I create the brand in 1976. And since 1976, we sell the bottles at our name. And for the moment, we sell in 40 countries. And we export 85% of our production.
Local legends about the origins of Cognac even go back to the time of the Knights Templar. For more about that story, watch my documentary about the commanderies in Charente and the Templar graffiti that we can still find here. France began its tumultuous transition from monarchy to representative republic in 1789, bringing territorial and administrative changes to the region. Previously a principality, with subjugation to the nobles and dukes in Angoulême and other royal strongholds, Cognac would find itself in a newly created département, named Charente, that replaced the province of Saintonge as France would attempt to erase any ties to the monarchy. By the 18th century, major Cognac houses had been founded. Names we know today, such as Martel in 1715, Rémy Martin in 1724, and Hennessy in 1765. Cognac would grow to become a global export in an increasingly interdependent world economy that would culminate in its 20th century explosion onto the markets of Asia and North America. But before we get ahead of ourselves, that 18th century expansion gave rise to a major increase in vineyards, and the surface area used to grow grapes. Cognac was now associated with luxury spirits. Enter Phylloxera. In the late 1800s, a new disease would devastate vineyards across France. Over the course of multiple growing seasons, grapevines would be reduced to dust, producers ruined, local economies collapsed.
So the roots died, of course, vineyard died, okay? At a moment, they imagined to take the grain of the grapes and to plant a grain to have another one. But it don't work. C'était les hybrides.
Ah
ça
oui.
vous dit quelque chose?
Oui.
Bon.
Oui, les fameux, les
But
plants français.
it don't work.
What could stop this plague? Would grapevines survive the onslaught? growers searched desperately for solutions.
After many, many years, they imagined something different because in Texas, in US, they see that the Texas vineyards are not impacted by Phylloxera. They have Phylloxera inside the soil, but the vineyards go on. So they imagine to take a flower of US, flower of French, and make the marriage of the two flowers to take the grain, because they imagine that the flowers take the best quality here, the best quality here, and make the best quality. It's not true.
Doesn't work.
It's not true. It does not work. And after, they take the American wood, okay, and make a graph, and put the French on it, on the graph, and so you plant. That is to say, the American is inside the soil without problem with Phylloxera, and the French is outside. Okay?
Making good grapes.
And making good grapes. The best grapes in the world.
Finally, a cure was found by grafting European vines onto American roots. The export of French grapes to North America had actually prevented a much deeper crisis. During this period, the industrialization of France came to Charente, with the construction of the railways by the powerful company Paris et Orléans from the north through the city of Angoulême. By 1867, the east-west connection was made to Cognac, situated along the line between Saintes and Angoulême. Opening up new methods of freight export, the town's industrial zone began to take shape, and Cognac brandy would begin its ascent to worldwide recognition, with product being sent overseas to North America and east to Russia, China, and Japan.
So here behind me is the Cognac market, the Halles de Cognac. It is currently closed and scheduled to be demolished. This building dates from the 19th century, and as you can probably tell if you look closely at the top, there's a lot of rust, and a lot of these support columns are actually in risk of collapsing. So they're going to have to apparently rebuild the whole thing. This has obviously been a very controversial decision, and people regret that maintenance wasn't a little bit more proactive in order to save this historic building in Cognac.
Today, Cognac's historic freight yards sit unused, in an ironic twist of fate, as French freight traffic by rail has all but disappeared in many areas. With rising fuel and energy costs, highways remain saturated with freight truck traffic. In Cognac, we can observe an intermodal platform today with many empty freight tracks that in theory could be used as part of a larger road-rail freight network, should that ever become an economic or political priority. As of spring 2026, French freight traffic has suffered from neglect and a general decline in volume for at least 20 years. Before the First World War, the town of Cognac would have been like many other places throughout France, enjoying the technological progress of the industrial age, the arrival of electricity, new forms of communication, the railways, first automobiles and airplanes, many things that we take for granted today. It would be a time of great discovery, with events like the 1900 Exposition universelle in Paris and the 1903 Paris-Madrid automobile race, drawing attention to France's status as a brand leader in many domains. Tragically, the outbreak of the First World War would irrevocably change the course of French history, impacting an entire generation of young men and women, millions of whom would not survive to tell their stories. Pascal Combeau, mayor of Cognac in 1914, would write,
C'est avec le calme et la confiance, avec la froide et virile résolution qu'inspirent les plus nobles causes, que l'ordre de mobilisation a été accueilli.
The future became uncertain as Cognac would send its men, along with so many others in France, to the front lines. Le préfet de la Charente, Alfred Ducos, wrote after the outbreak of war,
Les vaillants, là-bas, sur la ligne de feu, ont besoin du chaleureux réconfort du vin de Charente, qui leur donnera la vigueur et les forces nécessaires pour repousser l'envahisseur. C'est à vous, messieurs les maires, que je confie la mission de rechercher dans vos communes ceux de vos administrés qui voudront bien offrir gracieusement du vin de la récolte ou de l'eau de vie, cette gloire de Charente, qui seront envoyés à nos soldats.
500 miles south, far away from the front lines, Cognac would quickly be chosen as a location to set up hospitals and medical care for the wounded. The senseless carnage and destruction that ravaged the landscape in northern France would not reach the southern regions, but like all villages and towns in France, Cognac would mourn its dead and honor their sacrifice with a war monument and an annual commemoration ceremony on November 11th, recognizing the armistice that put an end to 4 years of bloody conflict. Interestingly, it was chosen as a site to train 3 regiments of Czechoslovakian soldiers, numbering approximately 11,000 between 1917 and 1919. Economically, the impact would be felt especially hard in towns that increasingly relied on international markets, with Cognac having become known for its luxury exports. After the end of the First World War, America would quickly move towards Prohibition, and Cognac brandy would find itself in a niche export market that would set the tone for the next 100 years. In 1919, the 18th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was ratified, making the manufacture and sale of alcohol illegal in the United States. Ingenious entrepreneurs, such as William J. Chaplin, found that cognac, along with French champagne, were often prescribed by doctors as medicine. Using legal loopholes, Chaplin and others created increasing demand for cognac liquors. With a thriving black market and lucrative prospects for transatlantic shipments of French liquor, the Charente department and ports on the west coast of France became ground zero for exports to Canada and subsequently to the United States. In just under a decade, Chaplin had come to hold such prestige and influence that he organized a train excursion, hosting personalities such as Thomas Edison in 1928. Jean Monnet, born in Cognac in 1888, would also become a key figure of this period. A high-ranking member of the League of Nations, he would leave his position in 1923 in order to join his father's trade in exporting alcohol to Canada. It was a world with which he was very familiar. He quickly rose to become an international businessman and financier, influencing the future construction of the European Union. While the more opaque aspects of cognac export and the Prohibition era remain open to question, the impact of cognac, Jean Monnet, and its local culture on the course of European history are undeniable. By the time of the Second World War, the reputation of cognac spirits would already be well established. When American forces occupied France and liberated cities from Nazi occupation, up to 50,000 African-American servicemen were stationed in and around the city of Cognac. The 761st Tank Battalion, known as the Black Panthers, forged their reputation as solid and reliable troops by being the first to cross the Rhine River in 1945. While stationed in France, they compared their treatment by both French and American commanders. Still subjected to the prejudice and segregation laws by the Americans, they would find more human and compassionate treatment at the hands of the French. W.E.B. Du Bois was quoted as saying,
"The American Negro soldier in France was treated with the same contempt and undemocratic spirit that the American Negro citizen is treated with in the U.S."
After the return to the United States at the end of the war, the time in France would not be forgotten. Cognac became emblematic of the recognition of their contribution and service to France. The attachment of African-American soldiers to the town of Cognac and the spirits it produced would lead to investment in brand marketing, particularly in ebony and jet magazines, which targeted a black audience. Among the influential people of the time, Josephine Baker, an actress and singer with long ties to France, would make a heavy impact in the acceptance of French influence in African-American culture. As a recipient of the highest medal awarded a civilian for her work in the French Resistance, a cocktail containing cognac was later named after her. One brand of cognac in particular stood out from the rest. Starting in the 1960s, Hennessy would begin to make inroads in order to foster strong ties with the African American communities in North America, bolstering brand recognition and hiring Olympic medal winner Herb Douglas as a spokesman in 1963. The Civil Rights Movement and the Vietnam War transformed American society, and by the time jazz, blues, and gospel gave birth to early rap and hip-hop in the 1980s, Cognac would already hold a place in the minds of African American culture in the United States. Throughout the decades that followed, rap music would become the primary vector of advertisement for Cognac, and in particular, Hennessy, with thousands of references and lyrics. Up until the 2020s, the American market dominated Cognac sales. Only starting in 2024, with political instability in the United States and the difficult years following the COVID pandemic, did Cognac sales start to decline in North America. In today's world, Cognac is a vibrant and pleasant town, with a relatively healthy local economy, particularly when compared with the serious economic decline currently being witnessed in many communities in France.
On a spring day like today, the city park in front of the Cognac City Hall, which is behind me here, is an absolutely fantastic place for a stroll. Cognac is located on the banks of the Charente River, with all the cognac producers such as Hennessy and Martel, which have their warehouses down on the bottom end along the river banks. And as you stroll on these nice back streets, cobblestone streets of the city center, this entire town is very walkable, with very little, if any, street traffic. And it's really made as a pedestrian town. It's a city center that dates from the Middle Ages, with a lot of columned houses and just historical stuff pretty much everywhere you look here.
Nonetheless, distilleries have been struggling with declining sales and profits in recent years. This has repercussions both on local employment and politics in Charente. These issues have received increased attention in the press, and particularly the Charente Libre, a newspaper based in Angoulême. The answer to the trivia question, if you listen closely during the episode, is the House of Valois, or Valois royal family, which directly ruled France from the 13th to the 16th centuries. As an additional answer, there is also the House of Bourbon. This is where the tie to the United States again becomes interesting. In America, whiskey is often called bourbon, most commonly from Kentucky. This grain alcohol also happens to be the name of the French royal family that succeeded the House of Valois during the French Wars of Religion. Now, the Bourbon dynasty remained in power until the French Revolution, and with the strong French influence found in states such as Kentucky, particularly with place names like Louisville, Versailles, or Bourbon County, the association of French royalty with whiskey distilleries began sometime during the 19th century. Sort of an interesting side note to the town of Cognac. In future episodes, we'll continue to explore many historical subjects from the Roman Empire, the Knights Templar, or the 20th century. If you learned something new and enjoyed the content, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Your support makes projects like this possible. History comes alive only when we relive it. Until next time, merci et au revoir.